A-level biology video. It's Mr. Phillips, and today we're looking at genetic diversity and different things that can affect genetic diversity. So you need to understand what genetic diversity is, okay, and that is the number of different alleles in a species or in a population. So you should know an allele is a version of a gene. So for example, if you had just two different alleles, say one gene, so say two different eye colours, you would have a smaller genetic diversity in a different population if they had 6 eye colour genes, alleles. Okay, the larger the allele number, the larger the variety of phenotypes, and therefore the higher the genetic diversity. Now, high genetic diversity is really important because it allows a population to adapt to change. A low genetic diversity, if you had like all asexually reproduced organisms and the environment changes, such as a new disease comes along and they're not resistant to it, the whole population could be wiped out. And it's the high genetic diversity areas of the world that are important for us to try and conserve and look after, because they're the ones that give us all these different things that we could use like medicines and just basically we need to keep them alive. Increased genetic diversity happens due to mutations. If there's more mutations, you get more diversity, and then more, and also migration into a population followed by reproduction will increase it. There'll be a gene flow into that population. Population drop can happen though, and it can cause large genetic impacts. There's two terms you need to know today: bottleneck and founder effect. So the bottleneck effect is the idea that what happens if a population temporarily gets shorter. So let's say there's a disease or a fire that wipes out most of a population. So let's say the fires in Australia this year, for example, that have wiped out high numbers of populations, could cause a bottleneck effect. And you see here on this example how to describe a sort of bottleneck effect. You've got this population here, which has got a high genetic diversity, but for some reason, the population is made shorter and only these ones survive. What will happen then is if these 4 organisms then repopulate the whole population in 100, 200 years, you will have a population that's descended from them, and therefore whatever genes they have will be the main genes. So you can see that you get this shortening of genes, and it could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. If one of those people happens to have a inherited disease, even if it's a recessive disease that they don't have the recessive copy, 2 recessive copies of genes, so they're carriers, it could be that they give the whole population that disease. We'll look at that in a second. Another example here, you've got this bottleneck effect, so just only a few of the organisms survive to reproduce, and then all of them then as a result will get whatever genes that they have. So the bottleneck effect is literally like it's saying there's a bottleneck, less genes get through to the next generation because of whatever reason, and then the few survivors reproduce, make a large population, and it might be a gene that is not a very good gene and normally people don't survive it as a low frequency, may suddenly become a high frequency gene in the population and a high frequency allele, I should say. Example of this is the island of Pingalep, okay, which is a very small island, I think, in the Pacific Ocean, and a storm, tropical storm, a long time ago, about 40 years ago now, I think, reduced the population to just 30-ish people in the population. 2,000 people now live there, and they've descended from those 30 people. And what they've found was a lot of people have this condition where they have red pigmentation in their eyes. And the reason they have a red pigmentation is because the chief, who at that time was therefore reproducing with all the females on the island, had that condition. So it was a bottleneck effect, and he passed that condition on to now a high number of the descendants. Example in nature, the northern elephant seal. Humans basically almost wiped them into extinction to only about 50 seals. So what happened is their population size dropped massively. We recovered them, but because we recovered them from such a low number, so the current numbers of 170,000 have come from ancestors of only 50. So there's only 50 worth sets of alleles of those seals who were probably living close together anyway, who are now giving all that genetic diversity to 170,000. You see a massive bottleneck effect there. Then there's something called the founder effect, which is really the bottleneck effect, but it's just a different method of sort of it happening. So instead of maybe the population dropping and going small, it could be due to migration and geographical isolation that's happened. Here you've got an example of an ancestor population of butterflies, whatever they are here, okay, and just a few of them have made it onto this new island, okay, and you can see they wouldn't have any of the white butterfly genes there. You've only got the sort of dark brown and the orange ones, and therefore you would expect the population to be just that in the future, because you would only have a small allele number of people who have set up the new population, and therefore the future descendants will only have those alleles to get from. Obviously, which ones that you can't see, but it will cause a low genetic diversity. So I hope that's been useful for you guys. Important little bit. It's not a massive amount, but really important to learn.